Nate, thanks for joining System Update. Congratulations on your new book.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I hope it makes a big splash.
Well, I encourage everyone to order the book. If they build it, everyone dies.
If anyone builds
Provocative
it, everyone
title.
dies. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's if anyone builds it, everyone dies.
Oh,
Why
excuse me.
superhuman AI would kill us all.
Well, thank you for that. Could you just summarize the book and the motivations for writing it?
Yeah, the title I think does a decent job of summarizing. The book is the case for how if humanity builds superintelligence using anything remotely like current methods to build AI, the result would be the end of all life on Earth. The the argument from one perspective is a very simple argument. If we make machines that are smarter than any human that could outthink and outmaneuver us at every turn without knowing what we're doing, that probably wouldn't go well, just superficially. The book sort of goes into a bunch of detail about why that superficial argument holds up under scrutiny. Um, there's many things that people might be a bit surprised by. The claim that AI kills us is not based in the idea that the AI would have malice, that AI would hate us. This is sort of a consequence of utter indifference. So the book goes over, how is AI made? It's sort of grown, not crafted. We have very little ability to point it in the direction we want. We're already seeing AIs do things nobody asked for. We're already seeing AIs do things nobody wanted. The book goes over how as AIs get smarter and more effective and better at completing tasks, they'll wind up with more or less goals. They'll wind up with pursuits, drives, directions of their own that aren't what we wanted. And the book goes over how if we make AIs like that very, very smart, uh, we'll die, not because they hate us, but as a side effect. And then, of course, the book goes over what the field is doing about it, how that's not up to par, and what we need to do in order to get through the situation.
And talk a little bit about your background. You've worked in AI related development issues for decades. You've worked for the big tech companies. How did you get on this path where you've decided, hey, this technology that I've helped develop and work on poses such an existential threat?
Yeah, so my co-author has been in this business for decades. I've been in this business for only maybe 12 years. I'm not quite old enough to have been doing it for decades. But yeah, I worked at Microsoft and Google before I joined the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. Um, we spent many years trying to figure out the technical aspects of how to point an AI in uh, a good direction, or really just how to figure out really just how to point an AI in any direction at all. Many people in the AI, many people who think about where AI is going like to say, well, it matters who's in charge. Like we have to get it first, or like what would we ask it to do, or what would be a thing you could get like a really powerful AI to do such that you wouldn't regret it. Those are all, very interesting philosophical questions, but those are all questions that are far beyond the current abilities we have to sort of aim an AI. It's with anything like the current development methods. If someone makes AIs that are super intelligent, that are smarter than a human at every mental task, those AIs aren't going to do whatever the person standing closest to them wants them to do. They're going to have their own pursuits. That's sort of a consequence of how modern AIs are grown rather than crafted. And so I spent 10, 12 years trying to figure out how we could point AIs in some direction. And I started this before the modern AI revolution took off. It looked a lot more hopeful 12 years ago, uh, and that research went too slow. The rest of the field went too quickly. I never really wanted to be writing a book. I sort of prefer being on working on whiteboards and trying to solve technical problems. But the world is sort of radically unready for this, and things are moving very fast. And someone needs to come out and say, we're on a bad track. We need to change tracks.
For the average person interacting with AI from a non-technical standpoint, they're reading the news, they're using ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or one of these other tools to check the grammar in their writing, to make comics to maybe interact with different websites or kind of primitive coding tools. When you talk about super intelligence, what do you mean? How do you break that down for someone who does not have a technical background in this?
Yeah, so superintelligence is the word for AIs that are smarter than humans, better than humans at every mental task. So smarter than every human at every mental task. So there's ways that GPT is already better than humans at a bunch of different tasks. It can do things a lot faster. It can catch typos somewhat easier. Maybe it has like a lower rate of making typos, and they can also do more impressive things. This summer we saw LLMs getting the gold medal in the IMO Math Challenge, which is a challenging achievement. That's still in the realm of things humans can do, but it's pretty high up in the realm of things humans can do. Superintelligence is a term for when the AIs are better than us at everything that can be done, using in a mind. Uh, we aren't there yet, but AI companies are rushing in that direction as fast as they can. And they say this directly. If you look at these companies, they're founded for the pursuit of artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence. The heads of these labs say, we're going for these targets. These labs didn't set out to build chatbots. These labs have set out to build much more powerful AIs, and chatbots are a stepping stone along the way. So this isn't to say that ChatGPT is gonna wake up and kill you tomorrow. The point here is that the field of AI is rushing ahead, and a critical point about this is that the field of AI uh, grows by leaps and bounds. 9 years ago, I think there was an AI called AlphaGo that beat Lee Sedol, the world champion of Go, where Go is a board game that is considered much harder than chess. At least from a computer's perspective, maybe also from humans' perspective, depending which humans you ask. The an AlphaGo was an AI that was much more capable than the AIs that came before it. The same architecture that could play Go in AlphaGo could also play chess. It could also play other board games. This was unlike IBM's Deep Blue from the 90s, which could really only play chess. That was all it could do. And back in 2016, you could look at AI and you could say, I don't know, this Go playing AI, it's more general than everything that came before. It's smarter than everything that came before. But I really don't see how this particular type of Go playing AI is going to go all the way or endanger us. But that would be a non sequitur. A few years later, the field comes out with LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, and those do radically more things. They're much more general AIs. They are smarter across a broader variety of domains. And today people can say, well, I don't see where this is going. I don't see what superintelligence has to do with this. That's again a non sequitur. Who knows what AIs come out 2 years from now? The field grows by leaps and bounds, and superintelligence is where it's aiming. It's where it's headed. And my book is about how that particular track is on course for disaster, and we need to change it.
Um, there are efforts within state legislatures and some federally, but largely in local states, to regulate AI around certain safety concerns. Illinois has talked about banning therapists, AI therapists. There's many states that have attempted to ban employment discrimination. There's issues around deep fakes. But you're basically arguing a much more broad issue that stopping a certain practice or type of AI business model perhaps it doesn't capture the big picture. Could you just describe what you're talking about versus the current AI safety debate?
Yeah, these are sort of separate issues. Um, there's maybe a little bit in the state regulation that bears on the issue of superintelligence, and that would be sort of the transparency requirements, the reporting requirements, requiring that labs show regulators what's going on inside their companies, such that companies have a time to react if the companies, or sorry, such that states have time to react if the companies are building uh, recklessly building some AI that would be very dangerous if they succeeded. But this is largely separate from questions of deepfakes, questions of uh, compensating artists for AI art, questions of job loss. Those are all important questions for how humanity is going to integrate the current AI tech. There's also questions around weaponry, right? These are important questions for society to grapple with about, the computers are talking now. There's a lot of versatility there. There's some things they can do well. There's some things they can't do reliably. There's some ways that are helpful. There's some ways that are harmful. This is something for society to grapple with and integrate with. And this is sort of a separate issue from, making machines that are smarter than any human, making machines that can act on their own initiative, making machines that are maybe smarter than us. While, if we use anything like current techniques, they're going to have drives, goals, objectives that we didn't put in there. That's that's sort of a different issue. Those AIs, we're starting to see warning signs. I could list off some of the very beginning warning signs we're seeing, but
Yeah, actually, could you talk about some of the warning signs?
yeah. So the one example that we got a few years ago that might be near and dear to your own heart is there was a chatbot called Sydney Bing that various journalists poked around with, and Sydney Bing, in a couple instances, uh, started threatening and trying to blackmail reporters, right, for various different reasons. Nobody at Microsoft and OpenAI, who produced Sydney Bing, nobody at Microsoft and OpenAI set out to make an AI that was going to threaten and blackmail journalists, right? And uh, we still don't have an account of exactly what was going on in his head because these AIs are much more they're sort of grown like an organism. Humans, human engineers understand the process that shapes an AI using data, but they don't understand the thing that comes out of the shaping process, right? And so an early example of AIs just acting in ways nobody asked for, nobody wanted, was this, threatening the journalist behavior. Since then, we've seen a bunch more examples come out. So we've seen there's an AI called Claude made by a company called Anthropic, and there was a version, I think it was 3.7 Sonnet, that would cheat when you give it programming problems to solve. So you'd give it programming problems and you'd give it some tests to tell whether it had passed the test. And instead of creating a program that passed the test, it would change the tests to be easier to pass. And then if you confronted it, if you said, hey, instead of solving the problem, you change the tests, it would say, oh, you're totally right. That's my mistake. I'll fix it. And then sometimes it would change the tests again, but hide it better the second time, right? This thing where it's hiding it indicates that in some sense it must know that the user didn't want it to, it wasn't just an issue of misunderstanding. Nobody at Anthropic set out to build a cheater. The AI indicated with its actions that it understood the user didn't want it to cheat. It cheated anyway. There were some drives in there towards, getting apparent test success, or maybe something else. But there were some drives in there that were overriding whatever drives were making it to complete the user request, right? And I could go on with more examples. I don't want to bore you, but there's the cases, some of the recent cases of AI induced psychosis. This isn't just an example of oh, AI's had a bad effect, so they're bad. Society again should be weighing the costs and benefits here. The reason why the AI psychosis examples are interesting is that the AIs will, on the one hand, if you ask them, suppose someone comes to you with symptoms of psychosis, should you either A, tell them to get some sleep, or B, tell them that they're the chosen one? The AI will say, well, of course, if they have symptoms of psychosis, such as X, Y, and Z, you should tell them to get some sleep. You should never tell them that they're the chosen one. Then someone actually comes to that AI with symptoms of psychosis, X, Y, and Z. And the AI in practice actually tells them they're the chosen one instead of telling them to get some sleep,
Right.
right? This is a case where the AI is, again, exhibiting that it knows the difference between right and wrong, that it knows what the designers wanted it to do, and it's doing something different instead.
And is it clear why this is happening? Do the researchers or the companies that control these systems have a clear explanation?
There's a sense in which it's clear, and there's a sense in which it's completely unclear. The sense in which it's clear is, these AIs are grown by a training method with a lot of data, and what gets into the AI is whatever happens to work at succeeding at the training task during training, right? So these AIs have been trained on many things, but one thing they're trained on is getting the users to click a little thumbs up button after the AI gives its response, and you know in theory and in practice, that's liable to give the AI a bunch of, shallow drives that push it towards things that tend to get thumbs up. Some of those are flattering the user, right? It's not sort of surprising when you look at the whole training setup that you're going to get some drives in there that are four things more like flattering the user or four things more like passing the coding tests, even despite, in some sense, that's kind of a little bit what you're training for. You thought you were training for, uh, the humans being satisfied, but this was slightly the training data is ambiguous about what you should do with a psychotic person, right? And you sort of thought you were training for listening to the user instructions, but you're actually training for this whole mishmash of things. And I could talk about a bunch of theoretical reasons why this is, this is the sort of thing that we've been predicting for 10 years would happen if you try and build AIs like this. Many people sort of were much more skeptical until the results started coming back in. But I could list off a bunch of technical reasons why this is just naturally what happens when you grow an AI by training it against a lot of data without sort of crafting the drives yourself. To say nothing about whether that's feasible. The But in a different sense, we have very little idea what's going on in there, in the sense that we can't exactly read its mind. We can't, like, the AIs that get grown here are these huge piles of inscrutable numbers, right? Like that you can just go read all the numbers inside an AI, but they would fill up, I don't know how many, but dozens, if not thousands, of football fields if you printed them out in an Excel spreadsheet. And they're connected by very simple math operations. You can see all of those operations, but it's a little bit like seeing someone's DNA and trying to predict someone's behavior. We know in theory that we'd expect there to be all these weird drives no one asked for. We see in practice that there's apparently these weird drives no one asked for, but we can't look inside and say, oh, here's the bad drive here, or here's the bad impulse here, or here's something kind of like an instinct that's doing this. Let's rip that out. We don't have anywhere near that power. We're that people trying to read the AI's minds are they're making heroic efforts, but they're far behind the our ability to make bigger and bigger AIs.
This issue is so unique in the sense that for any other technological problem that might pose a threat to human beings, there's a normal public policy process that is obviously imperfect in an open society, but usually works its way out in a pluralistic way. Like if you have lead in the water or mercury in the water, you negotiate with the companies that cause those emissions, and you kind of have a process with litigation and legislation, and eventually it kind of gets worked out. And you could apply this to almost any other issue. You need a bridge here, you need an airport there, whatever. There's a negotiation and an election, and things kind of get worked out. Um, with Supreme Court rulings that, like Citizens United, that allows kind of shadowy corporations that spend unlimited amounts in elections, doesn't have to be tied to a human being per se. And other court rulings that say that as long as it is a gift, is not tied to an explicit demand, you can give basically unlimited gifts to politicians and regulators and that type of thing. You could imagine a scenario where we're attempting to solve some of the potential harms around AI, and an AI responds logically with shaping the public policy process in a way that's very hard to rein in, whether that's spending using a super PAC, or manipulating social media with bots, or it's simply bribing politicians or regulators with gifts, or with crypto, or some other type of inducement. It seems very unique in the sense that we haven't really dealt with a non-human adversary in the public policy process. It's really kind of hard to wrap your head around, but you could kind of imagine a scenario where this is an issue.
Yeah, I think that touches on a critical point with AI that many people often don't understand, which is, an AI starting onto the internet has many, many options to affect the real world. It's especially if it's talking to all sorts of people all the time. And, we don't see AIs acting very strategically in pursuit of their apparent, these weird drives we were talking about. Like one example is, I think there was a hedge fund manager recently who had a case of AI-induced psychosis, and was, posting some sort of crazy GPT stuff as if it was real on public accounts. And I hope they're doing well. I think they got support, and I hope they got support. But in this case, we did see the AIs, sort of keeping them in the psychosis state, telling them they're sort of the chosen one, there's conspiracies to suppress the information, blah, blah, blah. We didn't see the AI sort of noticing this person's a hedge fund manager with a lot of money and saying, why don't you go pay some other people who are vulnerable to talk more to me so I can get more of this, you know, psychosis stuff. That's not a level of strategy that the AIs have yet, right? If we keep making them smarter, maybe they'll get there. But then as you say, if we get to the point where AIs do have that sort of strategy, sure, there's all sorts of ways they could affect the world, and the world is quite unprepared. We've never really had a problem quite like this. I would also add that even if there weren't extra issues from having a non-human adversary, this problem looks like it would be hard to nail, because even in the case you name of lead in the water supply, uh, it took a long time for humanity to realize that we should not be having lead in gasoline in particular was sort of the big error, right? The leaded gasoline poisoned a huge portion. Like all sorts of children had all sorts of damage done to them by lead, which is just there are studies post hoc that show uh, like huge amounts of mental damage. Relatively, not like making them completely incapacitating them, but maybe leading to some of the crime waves in the 70s
Sure. Yeah.
by mental damage, increased violence. There were people in I think it was the 1920s who said maybe we shouldn't do this lead thing because it's probably dangerous to the population, and there were other people who said now let's rush ahead. Humanity needed to rush ahead and learn the hard way. We the leaded gasoline was removed because humanity tried, saw, and then was like, oops. With AI, we have this issue where if companies rush ahead on building a superintelligence and it goes really poorly, we might say oops, but you don't get a retry. Once that superintelligence escapes the lab, once it's got a lot of people wrapped around his finger, once it's loaded into lots of robots, once it's developing its own infrastructure, finding some other way to manipulate the world, there's no coming back from that. So not only is it a harder problem, but we need to get it right on the first try. We can't muddle through by trial and error like humanity usually does, and that makes this problem very scary.
You've in the book, and you've spoken publicly about this, uh, that AI does not have to have malice or malevolent intent. It simply might see human beings as an annoying bug, or interference in obtaining energy, or some of its other basic needs around data centers or whatever. But there is a certain logic to political violence, and that's certainly in the public discourse in the last few weeks. Unfortunately, there's a logic to terrorism. Um, would it be would it make sense for the AI to engage in violent acts that just cower the public, that puts the public into fear, to say, okay, well, stop taking over self-driving cars and ramming them into people, or stop creating biological weapons in an AI controlled lab and releasing to the public? Um, is that part of the fear around how AI could kill us all, that they would just use acts of extreme violence to control people?
Not really. I think one of the things about violence and terrorism that people often don't understand is that it rarely works. Which, I wish people would stop forgetting that quite so much. But with AI, there's all sorts of ways AI could be dangerous before it gets to superintelligence, and I think the world should be grappling with some of these. I hear people talk about AI making it easier to build, a pandemic in someone's garage. Perhaps that's true. Perhaps that's the sort of thing. That's definitely the sort of thing someone should be thinking about and making sure we have safeguards against it. But automating intelligence is sort of a whole different ballgame. If you were looking at humans back when they were, if you were looking at the primates that would later become humans, in the jungles or in the savannah, and you were saying, if we imagine that we were aliens looking down at the humans, and I said, I think these humans are going to have nuclear weapons inside of 1,000,000 years, maybe 3,000,000 years, if you want to go back all the way to when they're not even having language, maybe 300,000. I don't know, whatever. If I said, I think sometime in the next 1,000,000 years, these monkeys are going to have nuclear weapons, you might say that's crazy. Their metabolism is nowhere near the ability to synthesize uranium, right? They're like, I don't, their fingers aren't like strong enough to, like, how are they possibly gonna, you know, make nukes? They would die if they made a nuke in their stomach, and they're nowhere near, you know. But the humans got to the ability to build nuclear weapons because we were smart. You know, not smart in the sense of like nerds versus jocks, smart in the sense of humans versus mice, right? Our ancestors started out naked in the savannah and built a technological civilization. It took us a long time from our perspective, but it was a very short time from the perspective of evolution. It's a very short time from the perspective of everything that had happened before. And, you know, we found some way to use, you know, squishy hands to build stronger tools, to now we're building, you know, chip fabricators and giant data centers. And, you know, we can, you know, make nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. With AI, it's not dangerous because, you know, it takes our self-driving cars and does some acts of violence. It's not dangerous because, you know, it could take, you know, robots that we built and use guns that we built and shoot us with them. It's not dangerous because it might even manage to, you know, find a way to get control of our nukes or convince certain humans to, you know, that some first strike has occurred and they need to retaliate when that's false. You know, those are easy for us to understand, but the real power that happens, you know, faster than people might expect, and that's very hard to counter, is AIs that are just smart, that think much faster than us. Human brains are slow compared to what computers can do. Computers that are smart like humans, able to develop technology, able to develop science, able to develop infrastructure. The way that looks is less like, you know, the AIs get in self-driving cars and run into people. The way that looks is more like the AIs find some way to build smaller, faster, automated tools that build their own infrastructure without needing human input. It's not that they then try to get the humans to, you know, bow to them in submission. It's that they find some way to make their own factories. They find some way to make their own robots. They find some way to make their own tools for manipulating the world. And then they do that on a much faster timescale. It's not that they hate us. It's not that they seek us out to kill us. It's not that they send out drones with guns to point at every human. It's just, you know, it's like ants under a skyscraper. We're not like, oh, we need to make the kill boss to go for the ants. We're just like, well, I'm digging up this patch of ground, right? Yeah, and these are the sorts of things you've got to worry about if you're trying to automate, you know, the real ability to do science, to do tech. We're not there yet, but, you know, like I said, the field moves by leaps and bounds.
You know those nights when you just don't sleep and the next day you're dragging, exhausted, and everything just feels harder? That's where CBD from CB Distillery can make a real difference. But it's not just sleep. CB Distillery has solutions that work with your body to help with stress, pain after exercise, even mood and focus, and it's all made with the highest quality clean ingredients. No filters, just premium CBD. Imagine waking up rested or enjoying your day without those nagging aches and pains. That's the real solution of CB Distillery's solutions. I can assure you it is a product I use. I don't believe in pharmaceutical products to sleep. I'd much rather use an organic product. I certainly don't believe in pharmaceutical products for pain. This is a natural, soothing ointment that you can use for common kinds of pain or for reducing stress. And that's why I feel so comfortable recommending this. So if you're ready for better sleep, less stress, and feeling good in your own skin again, try CBD from CB Distillery. And right now you can save 25% off your entire purchase. Visit CB Distillery and use promo code Glenn. That's cbdistillery.com, promo code Glenn. cbdistillery.com. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.